Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of She and Finney's webinar series. My name is Jim Reedy, and I'm just thrilled to be here with you today. I was thinking about this and thinking about COVID and what it's meant for us in the last year. And I know a lot of you folks have certainly thought a lot about that and dealt a lot with that. But quick retrospect, if you're thinking about where we were a little over a year ago, we had shutdowns, we had furloughs, we had to quickly scramble to get people to work remotely. We had other accommodation issues. Then you had the FFCRA and paid leave time. And then you had the CARES Act, which was both the PPP loans, but also augmenting unemployment. So all that stuff going on in addition to your normal HR work. And then on top of that, additional safety work and so on. A crazy, crazy year. And then, the visual that comes to mind is a tsunami. A tsunami is typically not just one wave. It comes in a series of waves. So we had the COVID-19 and what that meant for us. And then you had sort of the secondary wave in the fall and winter. And then just as that subsides, what do we get hit with? We get hit with unemployment fraud claims. And it is truly significant. A report that came out yesterday, and Abby will talk about this, is in the hundreds of billions of dollars of unemployment fraud claims. And it is a big issue. It is one that Abby has dealt with as she has worked with the Department of Employment Security over the last year. And we're just thrilled that she could be with us today. Abby Martin is going to talk about the issue of unemployment fraud, the response that employers should have if presented with a fraud claim, and even some prevention suggestions in dealing with these matters. So just thrilled that Abby could be with us today. Please welcome Abby Martin and enjoy the program.
Hi, everyone. I just want to introduce myself and thank you to Jim for the introduction. I'm an associate here at She and Finney, and I previously was loaned out to New Hampshire legal assistance for 5 months to help with the boom in unemployment claims and assisting claimants with getting benefits. And so that's provided me with a little bit of perspective for you all to show you some of the different aspects of the potential fraud and unemployment claims. And so here we go. And this is just a disclaimer. This is a general presentation about unemployment fraud. It's not a substitute for specific legal advice addressing your unique circumstances. So what are we going to talk about today? We'll talk about the exploding fraudulent unemployment claims across the country. We'll look at how to identify fraudulent claims. We'll talk about how to protect your employee personal information. And lastly, how to respond to fraudulent unemployment claims. So fraudulent unemployment claims have boomed across the country. The Office of the Inspector General currently estimates that federal funding allocated to unemployment programs is about $630 billion. And now normally, the rate of improper payments for federal benefits hovers around 10%. This would mean that $63 billion could be paid out improperly. However, the OIG and others estimate that the rate will actually be much higher, with one firm claiming that it could be as much as $200 billion. And to date, the OIG has assisted in the recovery of more than $565 million in fraudulent benefits. They also found that over 91,000 Social Security numbers of deceased people were used to file claims, paying potential benefits of $58.7 million. And every state has experienced some form of unemployment fraud. For example, the Colorado Department of Labor has flagged over 1 million applications for potential fraud. Massachusetts reported that it paid out $242 million in improper claims. In Ohio, more than 100,000 people have reported potential fraud. In California, they identified at least $11.4 billion in fraudulent claims, but expect much more. And as of December in 2020, New Hampshire had seen about 10,000 fraudulent claims, but only paid out about 100 claims worth $370,000. So I also wanted to provide you some specific examples that we've seen. For example, an employer received a claim for benefits for an employee who is still working, and the employee did not file for benefits. If this happens to you, it's a red flag for unemployment fraud. Another employer received a claim for benefits for someone who never even worked for that employer. It's another red flag. An employee who also received a notice from a completely different state. If you work in New Hampshire and have only ever worked in New Hampshire, you shouldn't be receiving a notice from the Massachusetts Department of Unemployment Assistance. That's a red flag. And our own Jim Reedy also had his own story with unemployment.
Yes, so I've been working with clients over the last several months that where they were hit with, where the CEO, the VP of HR, and others were hit with fraudulent unemployment claims. Again, they're in the office. They'd never taken a day. They'd never lost employment or become eligible even for partial unemployment. And these claims started to roll in. And once we started to see these, we saw these, as Abby said, we saw many of these. So one day I was sitting at work, working away, and I got a call from my wife who said, I know you're working hard and a little bit burned out, but don't you think we should have talked about this? What are you talking about? She received an unemployment claim with my name on it. And it didn't just have my name on it. It had the last four of my social, had my home address, which we had moved there 6 months before. It had obviously the name of my employer at Sheehan Finney. And I think it also included my favorite color, concern I had about a mole on my shoulder, the fact that I'm a Red Sox fan, and that I'm allergic to cats. I think that was all in there. But seriously, it actually had the last four of my social, it had my home address, the name of my employer, it had my middle initial, and so on. And we received it before Sheehan Finney received it. And of course, then Sheehan Finney received it, like most employers. And then there were many claims that hit here. Now, we had it happen in our Massachusetts office as well, our Boston office as well. So we weren't even immune to it. And but then working with the folks here, we went through the steps that Abby's going to talk about, which are how do you respond when you have a claim like that? Not only as the employer, but as the affected individual. And it provided us with some considerable comfort.
Thanks, Jim. These are just a handful of specific examples that we've seen. You as HR professionals have probably seen a lot more. So how do you recognize potential unemployment fraud? What does fraud look like? Does it look like employees or former employees falsely claiming eligibility for benefits? Does it look like errors made in the state unemployment systems? Is it identity theft? Is it organized crime? Well, in non-COVID times, one would expect that the first would probably be most prevalent. But now, with all of the different federal programs and additional assistance available, unemployment fraud tends to take the form of organized actors engaged in different fraudulent schemes that take benefits away from or delay the receipt of benefits by claimants who need those benefits. In July of last year, the FBI stated that criminals obtain the stolen identity using a variety of techniques for unemployment fraud, including the online purchase of stolen personally identifiable information, data breaches, computer intrusions, cold calling victims with impersonation scams, email phishing, and others. So here are some potential suspicious activities, things that the FBI believes should be red flags for you. If you or your employee receives communications from an unemployment agency that you are not expecting, that's a red flag. Don't just throw it away. Take the time to look at it and report it if it's potentially fraudulent. For example, if the name on the notice is slightly misspelled, or the social security number is off, or the notice uses a previous legal name, those are all red flags. Second, make sure you and your employees have good habits of consistently checking your accounts and credit cards. Any unauthorized transactions on your accounts could be related to unemployment benefits. And with everything being done online now, it can be very easy to forget about different accounts. If it's possible, set notifications for when credit cards are used or when money is withdrawn or deposited, or make it a habit of checking your accounts frequently. Third, unemployment, no matter the state, will never charge a potential claimant for filing benefits. If your employees or former employees are being asked to pay for an unemployment application, something is not right and it should be reported immediately. And lastly, always be mindful of the websites and contacts you make online. Government websites will always have a .gov at the end and will always be secure, meaning the website address will start with HTTPS. There are fictitious websites that are trying to mimic unemployment. So the United States Department of Labor has implemented some strategies in order to combat unemployment fraud. The first of these strategies is to provide additional funding to state workforce agencies. For example, New Hampshire Employment Security. This was announced in September of 2020, and states are permitted to use these funds for staff or other services to conduct fraud detection related activities and investigations, or to implement tools to increase prevention, detection, and recovery of fraudulent improper payments. And these on the slide are the amounts that New Hampshire and Massachusetts each received for their federal unemployment fraud detection activities. The second strategy that the USDOL implemented was the Integrity Data Hub. This is a program that provides a number of fraud prevention strategies, including ID verification, cross-matching of multi-state claims, fraud alerts, flagging suspicious email domains and foreign IP addresses, and analyzing national claim data. It's important to note, however, that the DOL encourages use of these systems, but it does not necessarily mean that a specific state will use it. As of December 2020, only 32 of the 54 state workforce agencies use the IDH, but certainly it provides some hope that unemployment fraud will begin to go down. So once you recognize unemployment fraud, how should you respond? These are some general tips that apply to employers and employees alike, so make sure that your employees know what to do if this happens to them. First, report any unauthorized transactions to your financial institution or credit card provider. Contact the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, to place a fraud alert on your credit reports. And then contact the Internal Revenue Service by filing an identity theft affidavit. Finally, use identitytheft.gov for any additional information. You will also want to file a non-emergency police report with your local police department. Please know that your local police will most likely not investigate any kind of unemployment fraud, and please don't call 911. However, this will establish a record of the potential fraud that you can provide to your creditors. Make sure you or your employee changes all of your passwords. Notify your employees that might be victims so they can take all necessary precautions, and train your employees on how to identify potential fraud. So this slide begins a number of slides that will provide some information on where to report potential unemployment fraud. First, you'll want to report it to the U.S. Department of Labor, the Office of Inspector General. You can use the linked form or call the numbers on the slide. This will be posted on our website, so you don't need to worry about taking all of the information down. And this form is usually only for federal unemployment programs like disaster unemployment assistance. But because many people are on federal unemployment due to COVID, it's also a good idea to report any potential unemployment fraud here. Next, you'll want to request an identity protection PIN from the IRS. This PIN makes sure that you are the only one with your Social Security number filing for taxes. The PIN only lasts for 1 year, and you must be able to prove your identity. Historically, it was only for victims of identity theft, but as of 2021, anyone can opt in. You'll also want to report any potential unemployment fraud to the Department of Justice's National Center for Disaster Fraud, disaster complaint. You can do this by calling the fraud hotline or filling out the online form. This website will also point you back to the Office of the Inspector General form that we previously talked about. Now, if your unemployment fraud takes place in New Hampshire, you will want to report it to New Hampshire Employment Security. You can use the phone number on the slide or use the linked reporting form. If your unemployment fraud takes place in Massachusetts, you will want to report it to the Department of Unemployment Assistance using the phone number and the linked form. If your unemployment fraud takes place in any other state, the U.S. Department of Labor has a listing of state workforce agencies and their fraud hotlines and reporting forms on their website. And for additional ways to protect employee personal information, please watch our data security webinar hosted by JP Harris, and always remind your employees to keep tabs on their data. Another way to do this is that several states have encouraged people who aren't claiming unemployment benefits to create an account with their state workforce agency so that they are already in the system and someone cannot fraudulently obtain benefits. That's completely a personal decision, but something to keep in mind. Does anyone have any questions? Jim and I are available to answer questions. Let's see. We have a question that says, I believe there's an email I have used in the past from the unemployment office in Mass to report unemployment claims, or do you advise calling as well? I would advise using any avenue that you have available. So using the online form, if you have a specific phone number of someone that you normally talk to at Employment Security, using the hotline number, anything that will help report and stop the potential unemployment fraud.
Abby, any additional steps that HR professionals should take? You mentioned some great suggestions there with regard to monitoring activity and so on. And you also mentioned JP's program on data breach and protections in place, but any additional things that you think HR professionals could take, or should they be conducting their own in-house sessions to educate their employees on the potential for data fraud?
I think conducting their own sessions is very good. You'll always want to keep your employees in the loop on what's happening with potential fraud, where their information could be going. And as well as just making sure that everyone is aware of what could happen is really what you want to be focusing on. And then making sure that with your HR information systems that everything is secure, and that your employees' data is secure, and you'll learn a lot about that from JP's program.
Several more questions that popped up, but I just had one quick one here. On the fraudulent claim that had my name on it, there was a phone number that had nothing to do with New Hampshire or Massachusetts. It was an out-of-state number. And of course, you know, the initial reaction is I want to investigate. I'm sure your advice is don't go this alone, don't investigate alone, especially if organized crime is involved. Turn it over to the local police and so on, right?
Yeah, exactly. If something like this happens to you or your employees, your best bet is to report it to all of the avenues that we talked about, and let those people handle it, especially if there's a potential for organized crime. That's just not something you want to get involved with. I'm looking at the questions. So one question is, I've been checking in with active employees when a claim comes through on their behalf, just to be sure this isn't fraud. Is this an okay way to get in front of it? My initial reaction would be yes, but Jim, do you have any comments on that?
I was just, sorry, I was distracted. I was just filing another unemployment claims. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
The question is, someone has been checking in with active employees when a claim comes through on their behalf, just to make sure it isn't fraud. And is that an okay way to get in front of it?
Yeah, I think so. But I think that, I mean, I had an instance where the employer was concerned that the employee may have actually filed the claim and was trying to create some sort of dodge in the system. And they had the active employee actually fill out an affidavit confirming that he or she was not involved and did not file the claim. It depends upon the circumstances, but checking in with active employees to make certain that they have that information and make sure that they cooperate, not a bad idea.
Yeah, I would agree. Another question is, who is responsible for contacting all those agencies, the employee or the employer? I think your best bet is for if there's a big batch and you as the employer are receiving these potential unemployment frauds, claims, fraudulent claims, that you should go out and report all of this. However, if your employee comes to you and says, I received in the mail, as Jim did, this claim for unemployment benefits that I did not make, the employee should then go and report as well as the employer. We received 2 new claim instruction sheets for people who aren't employees of ours. Should I report these as well, since they really aren't claims, but instructions on how to file? Yes, I would report that, because usually instruction sheets come before a claim or right after a claim. And so there's potentially a claim, a fraudulent claim that's involved there. I have a comment that says, I have had several fraudulent claims in both Mass and New Hampshire for current employees and for employees no longer working here and for made-up employees. I've spoken to each employee and responded to the state for each one. I want to share the information you provided today, but I think it will really freak out the employees to have to notify all these places. Unfortunately, this is the world we're living in at the moment, in that there's potential anywhere you go with whatever data you put out there, that there's potential for something to happen to it. And so it's a hard pill to swallow for some people, but I think it's something that you need to make your employees aware of. There's also, I have an attendee who said that there's also an email for, it looks like Massachusetts. It's uifraud@detma.org, and it's part of the fraud reporting form. We can include that in our follow-up email. There's a question that says, by an employer contacting an active employee, would that create a panic? Therefore, should NHES be contacting them directly? I don't think NHES will contact them directly. I think you, as the employer, will still want to tell them that this is a possibility, that their data may have been breached in some respects, and that you both will want to report the fraud. Jim, do you have something to say on that?
Yeah, I guess I would add to that, and Abby, you would know firsthand, NHES was absolutely overwhelmed with normal claims during COVID, and I don't think they have the capacity to then investigate and determine whether or not it's fraudulent in the first instance, and therefore notify individuals. I think it's going to be the individual and the employer that reach out and take those initial steps. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They are very swamped. Unfortunately, they just weren't set up to handle these big influx of claims, and this is what happens, and it's happened all over the country. It's not just in New Hampshire.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that, though, Abby, is that this was this a new phenomenon that created in sort of what's the expression? Never waste a good crisis. Was this created during COVID, or were there fraudulent claims before COVID? And it's just that they were amplified during this time.
There were fraudulent claims before COVID, but you're correct. COVID amplified the claims tenfold because of the sheer amount of money that was available for people to obtain through the CARES Act. Another question says, this happened to me as well, and I reported it, but received no verification or confirmation that anything was, quote, done. Was I supposed to receive something back? That's unfortunately, I would hope that you would receive something back, but I wouldn't expect it. As we just said, all of these agencies are so swamped with everything that's going on that if you do receive something back, it'll probably be a long while after you've filed the potential fraudulent claims.
So as you know, Abby, under the American Rescue Plan, there are additional unemployment benefits available for a period of time this year, and for good reason, because the economy is still recovering. In that regard, what steps have been taken to prevent, perhaps, or to reduce the likelihood of fraudulent claims in this next wave?
So one of the steps that Congress has taken is that claimants now have to provide proof of their unemployment. And so whether that's a letter from their former employer saying that they had been laid off, or proof that they haven't been scheduled for hours for that week, that's one of the biggest steps that I think that they've taken to combat fraud at the beginning and to not pay out those benefits in the first instance. Any suggestions to employees being reported fraudulent to assure them it was not the employer? Finding that employees are attempting to blame the employer for the data breach. My best advice would be to remind your employees that their data is everywhere. It's not, there's a possibility that it came from the employer, but there's also a possibility that it came from something that they posted on social media, or the fact that they use the same password for 15 different streaming services, etc. Jim, do you have any advice on how not to blame the employer?
Well, so when it happened to me, of course, that was my first instinct, that something happened here at the firm, but then I realized I'm a partner, so I was blaming myself. So I know, I will tell you that St. Patrick's Day, as you know, was just a little over a week ago, and every year I send something to my kids. My kids are scattered all over, and so I send them stuff, but it's from this one retailer that does graphic tees and hats and so on. I've used them 3 times, and you would think after the first time I used them, where I was subject to a data breach and the use of my credit card, I would have learned. But I like this place. I went back a second time, and it happened again. So I think likely something like that was indeed the source. And there is a lot of information out on the dark web. The fact that they actually knew my middle initial, though, was amazing, because I actually don't have a real middle name. I have a confirmation name. My parents couldn't afford a real middle name at the time. So, but the level of detail they have, and how insidious they are in getting that information is something that's truly amazing. But I think blaming your employer, asking your employer questions about things that they can do to improve their data protection, not a bad idea. But I think it's a wasted effort to go there. I think you go to quickly checking your information. And yes, it is a pain. And we're just about to file our annual taxes again, although that's been extended. But I mean, when you do file your taxes, sometimes that's when it pops up as well. But taking those steps to check everything, as Abby said, from your credit card activity to a bank activity to your credit reports and so on. It's otherwise just a good idea, but now it certainly is a very important idea. You don't want to have a situation where you've had experienced a significant loss beyond the pain of this unemployment claim. But Abby, you've got lots of other questions here.
Another question is, one of our employees said that he received a letter in the mail and alerted unemployment that it was fraud. And they said it was still possible that the fraud claim could get paid out. Why is it that if it was flagged? Unfortunately, as we said earlier, unemployment is just slammed with the amount of claims that they're getting, and they're currently going through the claims that they've already paid out to try to determine whether or not they were paid correctly. New Hampshire definitely has a lower rate of paying out fraudulent claims. We talked about how they only paid out 100 out of 10,000. But unfortunately, it's just the case that there's a possibility that it will get paid out. But there are ways that if it does get paid out, that the employee can report, the employee will not need to report it on their taxes because they didn't receive the money if it gets paid to a third party. And so as long as everything has been reported to the correct places, your employee should be in good shape. We had a comment that when an employer reported potential fraudulent claims, that NHES responded to a few with the following quote: "This claim will be locked down while under investigation." So hopefully if you report something to New Hampshire Employment Security, at least you'll receive some type of response like that. The last question is, has there been a decrease on fraudulent claims since last year? I don't know if there's necessarily been a decrease. I think it comes in waves, as we've talked about. As more money comes from the federal government, there will probably be more unemployment claims, fraudulent ones at least. And so we're hoping that it starts to go down with the implementation of some of the strategies from the U.S. Department of Labor, but it's all to be seen.
So I think be careful when you do have that employee who could be eligible and filling out that paperwork that you receive from NHES or otherwise in other states, dates of employment, reason for separation, separation pay received, and so on. Very important. And there's a lot of back and forth. Even before this fraud crisis arose, there was a lot of back and forth there, and employers didn't always pay attention to that. Pay attention. I think that's important. Abby, terrific job today. We really have come to rely upon Abby. As you would never know that she's a first-year lawyer with the firm. She's done an exceptional job, and not just in this area, but others as well. But we've really come to rely upon her as our resident expert in this regard. So if you have any additional questions, please do. Abby's contact information is there. Please do reach out to her. She's an exceptional resource. Speaking of resources, next month, the New Hampshire High Tech Alliance HR Exchange, it will be our monthly meeting, and that's on April 14th. And we're going to have our annual wage and hour update, and that's with Brian Bouchard. That's from 8:15 to 9:30. And then, yes, the triumphant return of our annual employment law seminar. This year, we're still virtual. It's going to be split up into 2 days, May 25th and May 27th, from 8:30 to 10:30. But within those 2 days and those two sessions, a significant amount of information. We try to focus on both the practical and certainly the most relevant, and the breaking news of what's on the horizon. So lots in store. The thing to remind you on that, as you register for that, which you can register on our website, just like with the High Tech Exchange and any other Sheehan webinar, is that you have to register for both of those segments separately. And there's a prompt in the registration information for the 25th and 27th. You can register for just one, or you can register for both, but you have to indeed register for both. And I'm sure that was as clear as mud, but take a look at the information on our website. And it's all there, plus a description of the topics that we will be covering. But back to Abby, terrific job today. Really very helpful, not only in my personal circumstance, but also in all the other unemployment issues that we've had with our clients. And as Abby said, there likely will be lots more. So the steps that you take now to prevent that, detect that and to address it, I think are going to be critical for your business, because HR is a busy enough profession without this on top of it. So, Abby, any closing comments?
No, thank you, Jim, and we hope you have a great sunny day.
Thanks so much.